I'm Naomi, 29 female. I live in a city that's always moving, in a quiet apartment that I worked incredibly hard to afford on my own, and my job as a corporate partnerships manager is demanding but rewarding. My life has been a study in careful planning and steady progress, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of curated perfection that my younger sister, Fiona, presents to the world. This is the story of how her carefully constructed world collided with a simple truth she chose to forget: that quiet, steady people have their limits. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, the dynamic between Fiona and me was set in stone, seemingly from the moment she was born. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who got good grades and followed the rules. Fiona was the star. She was effervescent, charming, and had a knack for getting exactly what she wanted with a well-timed smile. Our mother, Holly, was her most devoted audience. While I was praised for my diligence, Fiona was celebrated for her spirit. My A-pluses were met with a satisfied nod. Fiona's C-minuses were framed as proof that she was too creative to be constrained by traditional academics. Our mother, a retired florist, saw the world in arrangements. I was the sturdy, reliable greenery, essential for structure but never the main attraction. Fiona was the exotic, vibrant bloom that the entire composition was built around. "Naomi, you're so practical," Mom would say, and it was meant as a compliment, but it always felt like a consolation prize. "Fiona just has that spark, you know? People are drawn to her." And they were. Friends, teachers, and eventually, a massive online following were all captivated by her. While I was building a career through long hours and meticulous work, Fiona was building a brand. She became a social media influencer, her life a carefully curated feed of beautiful places, expensive products, and a seemingly effortless existence. I never begrudged her success. Truly, I didn't. We were different people on different paths. The issue was never her life, but how her life was allowed to completely eclipse mine within our own family. My promotions were nice. Her brand deals were family news bulletins. When I bought my first car with my own savings, it was a sensible choice. When Fiona got a new car sponsored by a dealership, Mom threw a small party. The disparity was a constant, low hum of frustration in the background of my life. I learned to swallow my disappointment, to celebrate my own victories quietly, and to expect very little in the way of acknowledgement from my family. It was easier than fighting a current that was determined to pull everyone into Fiona's orbit. This dynamic solidified when Fiona met Martin. He was a wealth management advisor, handsome, ambitious, and just as concerned with appearances as she was. They were a perfect match, a power couple for the Instagram age. Their relationship was a public spectacle, documented through professional photo shoots and gushing captions. Martin's proposal was, of course, an extravagant affair on a trip to Italy, complete with a drone capturing the moment for her followers. I found out about it the same way everyone else did, by seeing the post online. A quick, impersonal text from Fiona followed hours later. "OMG, we're engaged. Call you later." She never did. A week later, Mom called not to talk about me or my life, but to gush for an hour about the cut of the diamond and how perfect Fiona and Martin were for each other. She asked if I'd seen the video, the one with over 1 million views. I said I had, and that it was beautiful. It was what she wanted to hear. In my role as a corporate partnerships manager for a large hospitality and leisure corporation, I was responsible for building and maintaining relationships with other companies. My job was to create mutually beneficial arrangements, discounts, perks, exclusive access, that would drive business and elevate our brand. I was good at it. It required the same skills I'd honed my whole life: diligence, attention to detail, and the ability to work hard in the background without needing the spotlight. One of the biggest perks of my job was access to a generous corporate discount program that extended across our entire portfolio of luxury hotels, event venues, and resorts. It was a significant benefit, one that was strictly controlled and meant for employees and their immediate families for personal use, not for large-scale events. I had mentioned this perk to Fiona once, a few years ago, when she was complaining about the cost of a hotel for a weekend getaway. I'd offered to see if I could get her my employee rate. She de-wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh, I'll probably just see if a hotel will comp my room in exchange for a few posts. It's better for my brand." I dropped it, feeling a familiar sting of my practical world being dismissed as less than. After that, I never brought it up again. The world of corporate policy and employee benefits was my world, not hers. It was another one of those things that made me sensible Naomi, and I was content to keep it that way. Little did I know that this small, forgotten detail of my professional life would soon become the focal point of the biggest family drama I had ever experienced. The stage was set for a collision, and as always, I was expected to play my supporting role without complaint. But this time, something was different. The years of being overlooked had created a silence, and in that silence, I had found a strength they had never bothered to look for. The weeks following the engagement announcement were a blur of wedding talk. Every phone call with my mother was a breathless update on Fiona's plans. They were looking at venues, interviewing planners, and designing a custom website. The wedding was going to be the social event of the year, at least according to them. It was to be a grand affair, reflecting their status and brand. I listened patiently, offered polite encouragement, and quietly wondered where, or if, I would fit into any of it. Fiona was busy, more so than usual, and our communication was limited to her posting stories online and me viewing them. I saw her trying on dresses with our mom and a gaggle of her influencer friends. I saw her and Martin doing cake tastings at chic bakeries. Each post was a polished glimpse into a world I was related to by blood, but completely excluded from in practice. One evening, my colleague Jenna and I were grabbing dinner after a long day at work. Jenna was more than just a coworker. She was one of the few people who understood the strange dichotomy of my life. She saw the confident, competent manager I was at the office and had heard enough stories to understand the overlooked older sister I was at home. "So, any word on when you'll be getting a bridesmaid dress?" she asked, stirring her soup. I gave a weak smile. "I haven't even been asked yet. I don't even know if there's going to be an engagement party." Jenna's eyebrows shot up. "Are you kidding me? The engagement was a month ago. They have to be planning something." I shrugged, trying to project an air of indifference that I didn't feel. "You know Fiona, it has to be perfect. She's probably just swamped." But a cold knot of dread was forming in my stomach. It was one thing to be the second favorite daughter. It was another to be completely forgotten. "Well," Jenna said, her voice firm, "any sister who doesn't make you a bridesmaid is out of her mind. Just saying." Her loyalty was a small comfort, but it couldn't erase the growing sense of unease. The signs were all there. The silence from my sister, the exclusive focus on the wedding's grandeur from my mother, it was all pointing to a celebration that was being built without me in mind. I was the sturdy, reliable greenery, and it seemed they had decided to create an arrangement made entirely of flowers. The following week passed in a haze of work and forced optimism. I told myself that Fiona was just disorganized, that with all the pressure of her online life and wedding planning, she'd simply forgotten to make the call. Any day now, my phone would ring, and it would be her, breathless and apologetic, asking me to be by her side. But the call never came. Instead, the clues started arriving through the one channel she never forgot to update: social media. It started subtly. A few of her influencer friends posted stories tagging a high-end restaurant using a custom hashtag, "Martin and Fiona get hitched." I saw champagne glasses clinking, beautifully decorated tables, and smiling faces. My heart gave a little lurch, but I reasoned it could be a pre-wedding dinner, a small get-together with her friends. It stung that I wasn't there, but it wasn't the main event. I could live with that. I texted her, "Looks like you're having fun." "That place is gorgeous." Hours passed. The message remained on read with no reply. The next morning, the evidence became undeniable. I was scrolling through my feed during my coffee break when a post from one of Fiona's closest friends stopped me cold. It was a carousel of professional quality photos. The first picture was a group shot, Fiona and Martin in the center, radiant, surrounded by at least 50 people. My mother was there, beaming in a new dress, standing right next to Martin's parents. Our cousins were there. Aunts, uncles, Fiona's entire social circle, they were all there. The caption read, "The most incredible night celebrating the most beautiful couple. Fiona and Martin, your engagement party was a dream. So honored to be a part of your journey." I felt the air leave my lungs. My hands started to tremble as I swiped through the photos. There was Fiona, laughing as she opened a gift. There was Martin giving a speech with his arm around her. There was my own mother dancing with one of our uncles. Everyone was there, everyone except me. It wasn't a small dinner. It was a full-blown party, meticulously planned and beautifully executed. And I hadn't been invited. I wasn't just forgotten, I was actively excluded. There was no other way to interpret it. You don't forget to invite your only sister to a 50-person engagement party that includes your entire extended family. I clicked on the hashtag. The feed was flooded with dozens of posts from the night before. Everyone was gushing about the perfect evening and the stunning couple. I saw videos of the toasts, the dancing, the custom cocktails named after the happy couple. It was an entire chapter of our family's history, and I had been completely written out of it. The knot in my stomach from the week before had twisted into something sharp and painful. It was a physical ache, a profound sense of humiliation and betrayal that spread through my chest. I locked my phone and stared at my computer screen, but the words on the spreadsheet blurred into meaningless shapes. The professional mask I wore every day felt impossibly heavy. I made it through the rest of the workday on autopilot, deflecting Jenna's concerned glances with vague murmurs of a headache. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what had happened. Saying it out loud would make it even more real, more humiliating. When I finally got back to the sanctuary of my apartment, I collapsed onto my sofa, the silence of the room amplifying the roaring in my ears. I pulled out my phone again, a part of me hoping I had imagined it all. But the pictures were still there, a vibrant, happy testament to my exclusion. I scrolled back through my texts with Fiona. The last real conversation we'd had was weeks ago, a brief exchange about a TV show. Since the engagement, it had been nothing but one-sided messages from me, offering congratulations and asking how things were going, all met with short, delayed responses, or, more often, nothing at all. Then I checked my call log with my mother. Our last call, 2 days before the party, had been another monologue about Fiona's wedding dress search. She hadn't mentioned a single word about an upcoming party. She had spoken to me, knowing full well that in 48 hours, our entire family would gather to celebrate, and I wouldn't be there. The complicity of it was staggering. This wasn't just Fiona's doing. This was a family-wide decision to pretend I didn't exist. My first instinct was to call them, to demand an explanation. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask them what I had possibly done to deserve being treated like a pariah. But my hand hovered over the screen, unable to press the call button. What would I even say, and what could they possibly say in return? "We forgot." It was an insult to my intelligence. "We didn't think you'd want to come?" A blatant lie. The most likely scenario was that my presence didn't fit the vibe Fiona was curating. I was the sensible, boring sister. I didn't have 1 million followers. I didn't bring any brand-enhancing sparkle to her event. My inclusion was, in her eyes, probably a net neutral or even a negative. I was background greenery, and she was going for an all-white, rose-gold-tinted aesthetic. There was no place for me. The bitterness of that realization was acrid. All those years of biting my tongue, of quietly accepting my place in the family hierarchy, of being the good daughter and the supportive sister, what had it gotten me? Nothing. Not even the basic decency of an invitation to a milestone family event. I had spent my life being reliable, and my reliability had made me invisible. They took me so for granted that they didn't even think my absence would be noticed, or, if it was noticed, that I would do anything about it. They assumed I would just swallow this hurt, too, like I had swallowed every other slight for the past 20 years. That night, I didn't cry. The sadness was too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard anger that settled in my bones. I turned off my phone, unwilling to see another smiling photo from the party I never knew about. The illusion of family that I had clung to for so long had shattered. There was no misunderstanding to clear up, no apology that could fix this. This was a deliberate act, a clear message of where I stood. And as I sat there in the dark, the quiet fury began to coalesce into a new, unfamiliar feeling: resolve. They had made their choice. Now it was my turn to make mine. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew one thing for certain. The days of me being the silent, forgotten sister were over. I spent the entire next day in a state of numb disconnection. I didn't contact Fiona or my mother. The ball was in their court, and I was morbidly curious to see how they would play it. Would they call, feigning surprise that I was upset? Would they pretend the party never happened? Or would they simply continue on, as if nothing was wrong, confident in my historical tendency to let things go? The answer arrived late that afternoon, not in the form of a phone call or an apology, but as a text message from Fiona. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, and my heart hammered against my ribs as I picked it up. The message wasn't an explanation. It wasn't an "I'm so sorry." It was a single, impossibly audacious link. Beneath it, a short, breezy message. "Hey, since everyone's been asking, here's the link to our registry. So excited. XOXO." I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process the sheer, unadulterated nerve. There was no mention of the party. No acknowledgement of my existence or my absence. Just a cheerful, public announcement-style text, likely copy-pasted to her entire contact list, directing me to a list of expensive things she wanted me to buy her. It was the digital equivalent of slapping me in the face and then holding out a hand for a gift. The audacity was stunning. It wasn't just an oversight anymore. It was a calculated, transactional dismissal of my feelings. I was not worthy of an invitation, but I was still considered a valid source for a contribution to her new life. My anger, which had been a cold, hard stone in my gut, began to burn. Against my better judgment, I clicked the link. I needed to see. I needed to understand the full scope of their entitlement. The registry loaded, revealing a website that looked more like a luxury shopping catalog than a wish list. It was hosted on a high-end platform I'd never seen before, complete with a professionally shot photo of Fiona and Martin on the welcome page. The theme was building our dream home, and the items listed were breathtakingly expensive. There was a $3,000 espresso machine, a set of designer luggage for $2,500, a smart mirror that cost more than my first car. The smaller items were things like a $400 throw blanket and a $250 artisanal cheese board. This wasn't a list for starting a new life. It was a list for upgrading a brand. But the most staggering part was the honeymoon fund. They had broken down their lavish, multi-country honeymoon into purchasable experiences. I could, if I felt so inclined, contribute $500 for couples massage in Bali, $1,000 for private cooking class in Tuscany, or even chip in for their business class airfare fund, which had a goal of $15,000. I scrolled through the dozens of items, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. The hypocrisy was nauseating. They could afford a party for 50 people at a chic restaurant, a celebrity-level photographer, and a honeymoon that cost more than my yearly salary, yet they were crowdsourcing the funding from the very people they deemed worthy of celebrating with. And then, they had the gall to send that link to me, the sister they had just publicly ostracized. It was in that moment that something inside me finally snapped. The years of accumulated slights, the constant feeling of being undervalued, the quiet acceptance of my role, it all crumbled away, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a physical shock. This wasn't just about a forgotten invitation anymore. This was about a fundamental lack of respect, so profound that they saw me not as a person, not as a sister, but as a resource to be tapped. My feelings were irrelevant. My presence was optional, but my contribution was expected. I closed the registry page, my hands steady now. The hurt had been burned away by a cold, cleansing rage. For the first time, I didn't feel sad or overlooked. I felt powerful. They had made a critical miscalculation. They had assumed that sensible, quiet Naomi was also weak, compliant Naomi. They had mistaken my patience for passivity. They thought they could push me out of the family circle while still keeping a hand in my wallet. They were wrong. My mind started working, not with emotion, but with a cold, detached logic that I usually reserved for my most complex projects at work. Retaliating in a fit of anger was not my style. I wouldn't send a furious text or make a tearful phone call. That's what they would expect. It would be dismissed as me being dramatic or overly sensitive. My response had to be as calculated and impersonal as their treatment of me. It had to hit them not in their feelings. They had already proven they didn't care about mine, but in the one area they truly valued: their perfectly curated, high-status image and the logistics supporting it. I stood up and walked to my laptop, a plan beginning to form in my mind. It was vague at first, just the kernel of an idea, but it was rooted in the world I knew best, the world of corporate structures, policies, and privileges. The world they so openly disdained. Fiona and my mother saw my job as boring and conventional. They had no idea of the quiet power that came with understanding how systems worked. They saw me as the greenery, the background filler. They were about to find out that sometimes the greenery is rooted in the very ground they're trying to build their fantasy on. Before I did anything, I forwarded the text message from Fiona, complete with the registry link, to Jenna. I just added one line: "This is what I got instead of an invitation to the engagement party last night." Her reply came back almost instantly. "Oh no, she did not. Naomi, this is beyond awful. This is a declaration of war." Seeing her validation was the final piece I needed. I wasn't overreacting. This was as outrageous as I thought it was. And a war, I decided, was exactly what it was going to be. Not a loud, messy war, but a quiet, strategic one, fought on my terms, on my turf. The gift registry wasn't just an insult, it was a mistake. It was the piece of evidence that had finally woken me up, and in doing so, had handed me all the ammunition I would ever need. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet fury and meticulous thought. I ignored 2 calls from my mother, calls I knew were not to apologize, but to ask if I'd seen the registry. I let them go to voicemail. Her messages were chirpy and oblivious. "Hi, sweetie, just calling to chat. Give me a ring when you get a chance." The disconnect between her cheerful tone and the reality of the situation was jarring. It was clear that in their minds, no crime had been committed. I was just supposed to fall in line, as always. On Monday morning, I walked into my office with a new sense of purpose. The hurt was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a laser-like focus. Jenna gave me a knowing look as I passed her desk, a silent signal of support. I gave her a small, determined nod in return. My plan was still taking shape, but I knew its foundation would be built on information. I needed to understand the full scope of Fiona's wedding plans, not just the curated version she presented online. I started where the entire spectacle began, her wedding website. It was easy enough to find. She'd linked it in her social media bio. The site was as polished as everything else in her life, filled with romantic photos and saccharine stories about her and Martin. I clicked on the event details page. There it was, in elegant script. Fiona and Martin will be married at the Serenity Grove estate on Saturday, October 18th. My breath caught in my throat. The Serenity Grove estate. It wasn't just a wedding venue. It was one of the most exclusive and sought-after properties in our company's portfolio. It was a sprawling, historic estate known for its immaculate gardens, grand ballroom, and 5-star service. It was also notoriously expensive, with booking fees that ran into the tens of thousands of dollars, often with a waiting list of over 2 years. How on earth had Fiona and Martin, for all their curated wealth, managed to secure and afford it? Martin did well. But not that well. And I knew Fiona's influencer income, while substantial, was often inconsistent. A flicker of suspicion ignited in my mind. On a hunch, I logged into my company's internal booking portal. As a manager, I had a higher level of access than most employees. I navigated to the internal records for the Serenity Grove estate and searched for the event date. The booking was there, under Martin's name. I clicked to see the details, and my eyes scanned the page, looking for anything out of the ordinary. And then I saw it. In the billing section, next to the staggering total cost of the venue rental, was a small notation. "Discount applied. CORP Partner Premium 45. My blood ran cold. I knew that code. I had helped design the program it belonged to. It wasn't the standard employee discount, which was a modest 15% and strictly for personal hotel stays. This was a corporate partner premium code. It was a special, deeply discounted rate, in this case, 45% off, reserved for high-level executives at our most valuable partner companies. It was a B2B perk, a gesture of goodwill to strengthen corporate ties. It was absolutely, unequivocally not for personal use, and certainly not for a massive event like a wedding. The misuse of a code like this was a serious breach of company policy. It could get an employee fired and the partner company blacklisted. My mind raced as I tried to connect the dots. How could Martin have gotten his hands on that code? His wealth management firm wasn't one of our corporate partners. I cross-referenced the code against our active partners list. The code was assigned to a major tech firm we had a long-standing relationship with. I pulled up the contact list for that partner, and my stomach dropped when I saw the name of the primary account holder, the executive with access to that specific code. It was one of Martin's most high-profile clients, a man whose portfolio he boasted about managing in a financial magazine feature I'd been forced to look at by my mother. The picture became sickeningly clear. Martin had leveraged his relationship with his client. He had likely either asked for the code directly or convinced his client to make the booking on his behalf, framing it as a personal favor. He had used his professional connection to fraudulently obtain a massive discount on the wedding venue, saving them a fortune and allowing them to book a location they otherwise could never have afforded. And they had done it all under the radar, booking it in his name, but applying a code he had no right to use. The sheer, calculated dishonesty of it all took my breath away. This went far beyond family drama. This was corporate fraud. It was unethical, a violation of my company's policies, and a gross misuse of a professional relationship. They hadn't just slighted me, they had entangled my own workplace in their web of deceit. The Serenity Grove estate was a jewel in our company's crown, and they were treating it, and the policies that governed it, with the same casual contempt they had shown me. I sat back in my chair, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Their ability to afford such an extravagant wedding wasn't just due to their influencer status or Martin's job. It was built on a lie that directly involved my employer and, by extension, my own professional integrity. They had built their dream on a foundation of deceit, using a system I helped manage. The irony was almost too much to bear. My boring corporate job, the one they looked down on, was the very thing enabling their fantasy. My suspicion had led me to a clue, and that clue had unraveled their entire scheme. I now held a piece of information that was far more powerful than any angry text message or emotional confrontation. This wasn't about me being hurt anymore. This was about them actively breaking the rules and compromising my professional environment. They had crossed a line that had nothing to do with sisterhood and everything to do with ethics. I took a deep breath and saved a screenshot of the booking details page, highlighting the fraudulent code. I saved it to a secure folder on my personal drive. My plan, which had been a vague notion of revenge, now had a clear and devastatingly simple path forward. I didn't need to yell or scream. I didn't need to plead my case to a family who refused to listen. All I had to do was my job. All I had to do was enforce the rules. The rules they had so arrogantly assumed did not apply to them. The panic and pain I had felt were replaced by a cold, hard certainty. They had no idea what was coming. They had forgotten about me, but they had also forgotten that my sensible world had very strict, very unforgiving rules. And I was about to become the auditor of their perfect, fraudulent wedding. For the rest of the day, I operated with a chilling sense of calm. I went through the motions of my work, attended meetings, and responded to emails, all while the screen shot of the fraudulent booking sat like a ticking time bomb on my drive. The knowledge I possessed was a heavy weight, but it was also empowering. The path forward was clear, but the execution had to be flawless, professional, and entirely impersonal. It had to be done in a way that was completely defensible from a corporate standpoint, leaving no room for accusations of personal vendetta. The truth was my weapon, and company policy was my shield. That evening, I drafted the email. I wrote it not as Naomi, the forgotten sister, but as Naomi, the corporate partnerships manager. My audience was not Fiona or Martin, but the head of the events and venues department, a stickler for rules named Cynthia, and I copied our head of corporate security, who was responsible for investigating policy breaches and fraud. I spent over an hour refining the language, stripping out every trace of emotion until it was a sterile, factual report. The subject line was simple: urgent query regarding discount code misuse event booking at Serenity Grove Estate. The body of the email was concise and to the point. I began by stating my role and my responsibility in overseeing the corporate partnership programs. I then explained that during a routine review of premium discount code usage, a small, justifiable lie to frame my discovery as a normal part of my job, I had flagged a potential irregularity. I detailed the event booking for Fiona and Martin's wedding, including the date and booking number. I pointed out the specific discount code that had been applied, CORP Partner Premium 45. I then laid out the facts, citing the specific clauses in our corporate policy. I stated that this code was exclusively for B2B use by the designated executive at the partner tech firm. I noted that the booking was for a personal event under the name of an individual, Martin, who was not an employee of the partner firm. I explained that this constituted a clear violation of the terms and conditions of our partnership agreement and a serious misuse of corporate privileges. I did not mention that the bride-to-be was my sister or that the groom was her fiancé. To anyone reading the email, they were simply names on a booking form. I was just an employee doing her due diligence. I concluded the email by formally requesting that the events department investigate the booking and take appropriate action as per company protocol for fraudulent discount use. I suggested that this action would likely include the immediate revocation of the discount, requiring the booking party to pay the full, non-discounted rate for the venue or face cancellation of their event. I attached the screenshot of the booking details as evidence. Before I hit send, I read it one last time. It was perfect. Cold, professional, and irrefutable. It was a document of pure corporate procedure. My personal feelings were nowhere to be found, yet they were the engine behind every carefully chosen word. This email wasn't just a report, it was a trigger. It would set in motion a chain of events that Fiona and Martin would be completely unprepared for, a corporate tidal wave that would wash away the foundations of their fraudulent dream wedding. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once this email was sent, the situation would escalate beyond my control and become an official company matter. The illusion of a happy, albeit dysfunctional, family would be permanently shattered. Was this what I really wanted? A part of me, the part that had spent a lifetime seeking their approval, hesitated. But then I thought of the engagement party photos, of my mother's smiling, complicit face, and of that audacious, insulting gift registry link. They hadn't hesitated. They hadn't considered my feelings for a second. They had made their decision about my worth to them long ago. This was not an act of revenge, I told myself. It was an act of self-respect. It was a rebalancing of the scales. I clicked send. The email vanished from my outbox, and a profound sense of finality washed over me. There was no anxiety, no regret, just a quiet, resolute calm. I had done what I had to do. I had taken all the pain and humiliation they had dealt me and transformed it into a single, decisive action. Now, all I had to do was wait for the system I knew so well to do its work. The response was faster than I could have imagined. Less than an hour later, my inbox pinged. It was a reply from Cynthia, the head of the events department. She had replied, all including the head of corporate security. Her message was brief and severe. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Naomi. This is a very serious breach. We are opening an immediate investigation. Please forward any additional information you may have." The wheels were in motion. I knew what would happen next. Corporate security would verify the details. They would confirm that Martin was not eligible for the discount. The events department would then be instructed to contact the booking party, Martin, and inform him that an audit had revealed the fraudulent use of a discount code. He would be presented with two options: pay the remaining 45% of the venue cost, a sum I knew would be in the tens of thousands of dollars, by a strict deadline, or his booking would be canceled immediately, and his deposit forfeited as per the contract's fraud clause. There would be no negotiation. There would be no sympathy. It would be a cold, hard business transaction. They had tried to play in my world without understanding the rules, and the consequences were about to be delivered to their doorstep, not by an emotional sister, but by a corporate enforcement team. I closed my laptop. My work for the day was done. The single, decisive email was out in the world, a digital messenger carrying a proclamation of consequences. The silence from my family was about to be broken, not by me, but by the resounding crash of their own deception. The fallout began 48 hours later. I was in a late afternoon meeting when my phone, which I'd set to silent, began vibrating relentlessly on the table. A quick glance showed a cascade of missed calls and frantic texts. 3 from Fiona, 5 from my mother, 2 from a number I didn't recognize, which I assumed was Martin. The storm had made landfall. I excused myself from the meeting, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. I stepped into an empty conference room and looked at the text messages. Fiona, Naomi, you need to call me right now. It's an emergency. Fiona, did you do something at your work? The venue just called Martin. Fiona, call Emmy. My mothers were even more hysterical. Mom, Naomi, honey, there's been a terrible mistake with the wedding venue. Fiona is so upset. Please call. Mom, they're saying Martin cheated. We have to fix this. Call your sister. The sheer panic radiating through the screen was palpable. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect life had cracked, and they were scrambling. They had immediately suspected my involvement. It was a tacit admission that they knew what they had done was wrong, and they knew it encroached on my territory. They didn't know what I had done, but they knew I was the only possible link between their plan and this disaster. I took a deep breath, and instead of calling any of them back, I called Jenna. I quickly explained what had happened. The email went through, I said, keeping my voice low. The venue has contacted them. My phone is blowing up. Good, Jenna's voice was firm and reassuring. Don't answer. Not yet. Let them sweat. They are going to lose their minds, and they will try to guilt you into fixing it. Don't you dare. I won't, I promised, and I meant it. Her words solidified my resolve. I ignored their calls for the rest of the evening. I went home, made dinner, and tried to read a book, but the constant buzzing of my phone was a distraction. The messages grew more desperate. Martin finally sent a text. Naomi, this is Martin. We need to talk about a misunderstanding with Serenity Grove. It seems there's been an error with a discount code. As you work there, we were hoping you could help clear it up. Please get in touch. A misunderstanding. An error. The language was so carefully chosen, so deliberately devoid of responsibility. They weren't admitting to fraud. They were framing it as a clerical mistake that I, the helpful family member with an inside connection, could easily rectify. The entitlement was still there, even in their desperation. They had excluded me, insulted me, and now they expected me to use my professional standing to clean up their mess. The very job they deemed so boring was now their only hope. The next morning, the dam broke. A call came from my mother, and this time, I answered. I put the phone on speaker and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, ready. Naomi, thank God. Her voice was a torrent of panicked relief. You will not believe what has happened. The venue, Serenity Grove, they called Martin yesterday. They said the discount he used was invalid. They want another $30,000 by Friday, or they'll cancel the wedding. Can you imagine? I took a sip of my coffee. Wow, I said, my voice neutral. That sounds stressful. Stressful, it's a catastrophe. Fiona is an absolute wreck. She's been crying all night. This is her dream venue. We have deposits down with the caterer, the photographer, everyone. Everything is tied to that date and that place. She took a breath, and then her tone shifted from frantic to cautiously hopeful. Honey, since you work for the company, could you just make a call? Straighten this out. It must be some kind of mistake in the system. I don't think it's a mistake, Mom, I said calmly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What? What do you mean? I mean that those premium discount codes are very strictly controlled. They are for corporate partners only, for business-to-business use. They are tracked and audited, for one to be used on a private wedding and for the system to flag it. It means someone must have used a code they weren't entitled to. I let the words hang in the air. Her silence was telling. She knew, of course she knew. She was likely there when they hatched the whole scheme. But Martin's client gave it to him, she stammered, the excuse sounding flimsy even to her own ears. It was a gift, a wedding present. That's not how they work, Mom, I replied, my voice still even. The client doesn't have the authority to gift it for personal use. It's a breach of contract on the client's end and fraud on Martin's end. My company takes that very, very seriously. People get fired over things like this. Partner companies can lose their contracts. A new sound came from the other end of the line, the sound of Fiona, who had clearly been listening in on the call, snatching the phone from our mother. Naomi, did you do this? Her voice was shrill, laced with disbelief and fury. Did you report us? Here it was, the direct confrontation. The mask was off. Fiona, I said, my voice dropping into a colder register. What I do at my job is my business. What I can tell you is that my company has a system in place to detect policy violations, and it looks like that system worked exactly as it was designed to. You did this, I can't believe you. You're trying to ruin my wedding, she shrieked. Just because you weren't invited to a stupid party, you're this petty. The accusation, the sheer audacity of her framing me as the villain for her own misdeeds, was the final confirmation that I had done the right thing. A stupid party, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. A party that my entire family, including my own mother, attended and deliberately hid from me. A party I was deemed not good enough to be invited to. And then, after all that, you had the nerve to send me a link to your ridiculously expensive gift registry. You don't get to exclude me and then expect me to clean up your mess when you get caught breaking the rules. That's not how the world works, Fiona. You're jealous, she sobbed. You've always been jealous of me and Martin. No, Fiona, I said, standing up, my coffee forgotten. I'm not jealous, I'm disappointed, I'm hurt. But right now, more than anything, I am done. You and Martin made a choice to be dishonest. You got caught. These are the consequences. This has nothing to do with me. This is about your own actions. You can fix it, she pleaded, her anger suddenly dissolving into desperate begging. I know you can. Just one call, Naomi. Please, I'll do anything. I'll make you my maid of honor. The offer was so pathetic, so transparently manipulative, that I almost laughed. After everything, she still thought she could buy my complicity with a role in the wedding she hadn't even wanted me in to begin with. No, Fiona, I said, my voice final. I can't fix this, and even if I could, I wouldn't. You need to find $30,000 by Friday, or you need to find a new venue. My advice? Start making some calls. Goodbye. I ended the call before she could respond. I blocked her number. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked Martin's number. The silence that followed was immense and deeply satisfying. The panic behind their perfect facade had been fully exposed. They were left scrambling, stripped of their secret advantage, forced to confront the real-world cost of their choices. And I was finally, blessedly, free of the obligation to care. The days that followed my final phone call with Fiona and my mother were strangely peaceful. I had expected to feel a storm of emotions, guilt, sadness, maybe even a twisted sense of victory. Instead, I felt a profound sense of quiet. It was as if a constant, low-frequency noise that had been humming in the background of my life for 29 years had suddenly been switched off. The silence was my own. Jenna was my rock through it all. I told her about the phone call, about Fiona's hysterical accusations and last-ditch offer of a maid of honor role. She just shook her head, a mix of disgust and amusement on her face. The nerve! It's like a parody of an entitled person. So, what happens now? Now I live my life, I said, and the simplicity of the statement felt revelatory. Of course, the story wasn't entirely over. The ripples of my actions continued to spread. I learned through the family grapevine, a cousin who had always been more sympathetic to me, what had transpired. Fiona and Martin couldn't produce the extra $30,000. Their frantic calls to Martin's client had resulted in him being furiously reprimanded by his company. The client was now under investigation for breaching their corporate agreement with my company, and Martin had severely damaged his most important professional relationship. They had no choice but to cancel their booking at the Serenity Grove estate. They lost their substantial deposit. The perfect wedding, the one built on a lie, had crumbled. They were forced to scramble for a new venue at the last minute, a far less glamorous hotel ballroom on the outskirts of the city. Many of their high-profile vendors, who had been booked for the original date at the exclusive estate, had cancellation clauses and were unavailable for the new, less prestigious location. Their grand vision was reduced to a shadow of its former self. My mother, after a week of silence, sent me a long, rambling email. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression and self-pity. She lamented how my unforgiving nature had torn the family apart and how Fiona's special day was ruined. She painted me as a vengeful monster and Fiona as the innocent victim. There was not a single word of apology for her own complicity, not an ounce of acknowledgement for the initial betrayal that had started it all. I read the email, felt a brief, familiar pang of sadness for the mother I wished I had, and then I moved it to my trash folder without replying. I was done trying to win an unwinnable game. The most telling part of it all was the silence from the wider family. The aunts, uncles, and cousins who had all smiled for the camera at the engagement party were suddenly quiet. No one called to scold me. No one called to check on me. It was as if a collective, unspoken agreement had been made to simply pretend the whole ugly affair hadn't happened. They had shown up for the celebration, and they had vanished for the fallout. It confirmed what I had long suspected. My role in the family was one of convenience. Fiona and Martin did get married. I saw a few photos that were posted online. It was a much smaller, less ostentatious affair. Fiona's smile in the pictures looked strained, the curated joy not quite reaching her eyes. Their social media posts about the wedding were noticeably muted. The dream they had tried to build on a fraudulent foundation had given way to a much harsher reality. I felt no joy in their misfortune, but I also felt no pity. I simply felt detached. Their life was their own, and for the first time, it had absolutely no bearing on mine. On the day of their wedding, I didn't sit at home feeling sorry for myself. I had made plans. I invited Jenna and a few other close friends to my apartment. I cooked a nice meal. We opened a bottle of expensive champagne, one I had bought myself to celebrate a recent promotion at work, and we toasted. "To what are we toasting?" Jenna asked, her glass raised. I thought for a moment, looking at the faces of the people who had supported me without condition. "To building your own celebrations," I said, "and to respecting the rules." We all laughed, and the sound of it filled my quiet apartment. It was a genuine, happy sound. My celebration wasn't for 1 million followers. It wasn't sponsored, and it wasn't built on a discount I hadn't earned. It was small, it was real, and it was mine. In the months since, my life has become my own in a way it never was before. The distance from my mother and sister has been freeing. I've focused on my career, reconnected with hobbies I'd let slide, and invested my energy in the people who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. My relationship with my work has also deepened. I earned a reputation for my integrity and sharp eye for detail. The incident with the discount code, handled so professionally, had actually enhanced my standing within the company. I don't know if my relationship with Fiona or my mother will ever be repaired, and I've stopped worrying about it. For a relationship to be fixed, both parties have to believe it's broken. As far as they're concerned, I'm the one who broke it, but I know the truth. I didn't break our family, I just stopped holding up the pieces of a facade that was already shattered. I chose to respect myself when they wouldn't. I chose my peace over their party, and that was a choice worth celebrating.